In the kingdom of Pharloom, silk tapestries weave sorrow. Lilting voices thousand strong echo through forsaken chambers. Theirs is a pleading song filled with hope for an answer. A strange affliction plagues Pharloom's bugs, anchored to the memories of the past. Hornet, child of beast and worm, the hero of Hallownest, finds herself in a strange and distant land. She must brave Pharloom's dangers, plumb its ruins, and reclaim her birthright to stop the haunted spinning of silk before the kingdom falls. This is the complete story of Hollow Knight Silksong. Before the Citadel, before the Weavers and their pale god, the regions of Pharloom were wild. Lush growth fueled communities of bug kind that lived in harmony with nature. In this age, lands that would become oceans of windswept sands in Karak and the blasted steppe were blue seas teeming with life. The blight of bile water and the putrefied ducks was unknown. Pristine streams fed fertile soil. It was an age of verdure. From this abundance, great kingdoms of bugs rose. Despite its vitality, the land held dangers, and many races fought amongst themselves and against nature to carve out their mark in history. 3 gained preeminence: the Crust Kingdom in the Sea of Karak, the Ant Legions of the Scar, and the dignified warriors of Verdania. Other lands supported civilization, as we can see in the ruins of the nameless town that stands on the surface far above Pharloom, but exactly how many and how expansive is uncertain. From the primordial plant Nylith, Shellwood Forest's boughs reached. Described as the ancient heart of Shellwood, connected to all its living beings, Nylith was guided by a benevolent directive: to grow, settle, seed, twist, wind, protect, and maintain the healthy but delicate ecosystem. A rushing river fed into deeper waters. Where they joined, the Kingdom of Karak was founded, its leader ruling a large caste of warrior bugs from the Coral Tower. The Driznet, Conchflies, and Karak legions relied on their native coral for defense and fused its sturdy material into their own weapons. As the Hunter's Journal entry of the Karaka Bladebug relates, the core member of a powerful order, trained fearless and faithful, theirs was a kingdom of warriors, one built upon their blades. Khan, the most fearsome among them, ruled as Crust King. The Scar were also a tribe of fearsome warriors, disciplined in combat and completely loyal to their song queen. The Scar singer, Carmelita, used her voice to unite and uplift her tribe, and used her blades to lead them in combat. For these hunters bold, stalk proud, roam far. For you, my children, for you I sing. The Scar inhabited the green tracts to the east, but may have even come from further afield, arriving from distant lands to build a new nest and new home here. Verdania combined the aquatics of Karak with the groves of the Scar to produce a beauty nowhere else equaled and protected by the most cunning of bugs. For shoot and sheath and blade, paths lost in shade, all born brave, all born free, peace earned by claw. 2 princes, joined by oath, joined by love, joined by blade, ruled Verdania as co-equals. The Clover Dancers, beloved by their subjects for their grace and for the ballet of death they delivered upon outsiders, for many years shepherded their kingdom. Inside Lost Verdania, we come across a lore tablet that tells the story in part of the 2 princes. 2 children born entwined apart, 2 children marked to rule. They danced, they sang, proved blades beyond, but none forgot their birth. For lovers born on beat exact shall be forever cursed. We'll revisit their story and tragic end, as well as the other kingdoms shortly. For some time, the world remained. Then, one event altered the course of history and sent it along the road that would lead to the current day: the arrival of Grandmother Silk. Grandmother Silk is a pale being, like the Pale King and White Lady, the monarchs of Hallownest in the original Hollow Knight. Pale beings seem to be a particular strain of higher beings, godlike creatures that stand above all others. The Radiance, the Nightmare's Heart are all examples of higher but not pale beings. As Hornet states in conversation with the caretaker of the first shrine, pale beings, higher beings, inherently desire veneration. They seek out bugs to dominate and rule, as though faith or devotion strengthen their reserve of soul, the powerful life essence of the Hollow Knight universe. Grandmother Silk is also the primal source of silk for what will become Pharloom and the Weaver race. Though the lore doesn't explicitly state, the Grandmother could be the progenitor of all silk in the Hollow Knight universe, as the Weavers of Deepnest and the spools they spun weren't native but rather arrived in Hallownest from Pharloom. The Materium describes silk as fine thread spun from the soul of its creator, highly coveted for its remarkable strength and mystical properties. Used to heal wounds, extend life, and weave powerful runes. A magical substance in bug kind, silk demonstrates the power of the Grandmother. The pale being arrived and desired a race to honor her, rather than subjugate the existing kingdoms whose rulers are implied to have strong wills. Grandmother Silk instead elevated bugs beyond their base nature and created a new race, the Weavers. The first Sinner's Dream sequence shows the moment Farlids, or another arachnid species, were picked by the Grandmother, who blessed them with her silken touch and transformed them into weavers. The spider race of Hollow Knight that enjoin intellect and savagery in a graceful shell. Weavers have unique qualities compared to other bugs. Gifted the power of silk from their mother, they produce the substance in their shells and can manipulate it better than anyone. They weave silk into magical runes, use it to empower advanced technologies, as demonstrated by Pharloom's weave nests, and strum lilting melodies that cloud minds and bend wills. As the midwife in Deep Nest relates, amazing things the weavers once crafted on their looms. Stories, shields, spells. So much of our history was spun upon their spools. Grandmother Silk named the weavers her children, but kept hidden the truth from their collective memory. She called us daughters, called us divine. She lied. The buried reality that the weavers were slaves, elevated in mind and ability, but nonetheless bound to servitude. Without this knowledge, they willingly obeyed their mother's commandment, established a great civilization, a kingdom to honor both the pale being as monarch and her progeny. The kingdom was Pharloom, and its life would be paid by the death of all other realms. The decline wasn't abrupt, but rather a slow decay, fed by the will of Mother Silk. Weavers inherited their mother's ability to captivate lesser minds through their song. A skill represented in the Nita Lin that, when played by Hornet, shows how even maddened bugs can be mesmerized enough to calm and sing. From depths below, the weaving ones beckon. Friends seduced, sweet promises whispered. Now, only the wind. The weavers, through melody and lies, ensnared many bug realms whose inhabitants slowly discarded their homelands to seek out Mother Silk and devote themselves to the pale monarch. The ruins of Nameless Town, which rests on the surface above Pharloom, is just one of many corpses of civilizations claimed by the weavers. Now, how long exactly this period of Pharloom's expanding influence lasted is up for debate and interpretation. Some clues, like the transformation of Karak from an underwater beauty to a shriveled and sand-blasted hell, would suggest a long time has passed since their fall. And also that the snail shamans who grant Hornet the elegy of the deep suggest the hearts of Pharloom's greatest were ancient. But others, like how one of Verdania's princes submitted to the Citadel and Cogwork legions, which wouldn't have existed at this point, and how the mortal scar singer Carmelita is, albeit weak, still kicking, suggests more recent deaths of civilizations past. Again, I think this points to a gradual decline, but please let me hear your own theories. In any event, Pharloom, under the blessing of the Pale Monarch and the guidance of the Weavers, grew into a kingdom of splendor, far more advanced than any other beheld. A religion soon developed in which the Weavers were seen as divine children of the god Mother Silk, and enthralled bugs exalted them in song and action. Widow's Silk memory shows, however, that the Weavers remained Mother Silk's slaves. The shining light, her influence, which flooded their minds with servitude. The Weavers enjoyed a golden age, and Grandmother Silk reveled in the devotion heaped upon her. But soon, the dark truth of the Weaver's origins would surface, and forever sever the mother from her daughters. Deep in the Slab's prisons, behind the doors of apostasy and bound in powerful silk runes, lies the first sinner. A weaver forced to endure eternity in a near-death feud. The first sinner was, according to this lore tablet, guilty of the sin of apostasy, penance by constriction, absolution denied. As her name suggests, the sinner was first among weavers to turn apostate, to spew heresy and renounce the religion of Grandmother Silk. But why? Her silk memory, which is one of the deepest to navigate in the game, suggesting both her age and her knowledge, holds the memory orb of the Weavers' elevation. Their mother lied. The Weavers weren't God-born. They were simply mortal beasts raised in ability to shower silk with faith. The truth of their enslavement was enough for the first sinner to rebel against Grandmother Silk. But how did the sinner happen upon this revelation? It seems critical information that the Grandmother would guard well. This one's husk held a masterful talent to weave silk into blazing runes. Throughout my life, I've seen runes woven for many tasks. Was she the first to hone such skills? The Hunter's Journal entry suggests the first sinner was one of the most capable weavers regarding the mystic art of silk manipulation. From their webbed aesthetic and connection to silk-fueled entities, it would seem memories of Pharloom's past are tied to silk. Perhaps the first sinner's skill in weaving allowed her to access the most distant, most restricted memories of her past and discover the profane truth. And her needle-in monologue during the boss fight reveals in part. Cursed by silk, cursed with silk, cursed to know the sin, the truth, cursed to know, suggesting her use of silk is what led to knowledge in the first place. But I'd like to offer an additional theory, one that takes us to the kingdom's bedrock and the depths of the Abyss. The Abyss, which appeared in the original Hollow Knight, lies beneath the rest of the world and is home to the Void, a black, unknowable substance, semi-sentient, that hungers for the soul of all things. The Void is a force, much like entropy. It seeks to claim everything, and it appears not even the power of higher beings is enough to defeat it. A deep dock diving bell, which we're told was used long ago, connects Pharloom to the Abyss, where we see remnants of Weaver activity, including Weave Nest Absalom, dedicated to researching the Void, as this chamber of void-filled jars illustrates. It could have been that the first sinner operated in the Abyss and that its influence severed the Grandmother's silken connection, in essence, liberating her mind from the Pale Monarch. But, as we'll soon see, the Weave Nests might not have been built at this time, so again, let me know your thoughts. Knowledge of the first sin rattled Pharloom. Rumor set silken strands ablaze, and the absolute authority of Grandmother was put to question. A great war of religion swept across the kingdom with disastrous consequences. The fact that the first sinner was imprisoned in the first place supports that not all weavers were united in rebellion against the Grandmother, nor were all other bugs. Some clung to their faith, their minds remained enthralled, and they took up arms against their brethren. Another period whose length is impossible to make certain unfolded as Grandmother Silk waged civil war against her daughters, who fought desperately for freedom. Turmoil lasted long enough for several events to transpire. First was the development of a network of secret tunnels known as weave nests. The ruins of 5 can be explored by Hornet in the current day, but perhaps others existed. This low, her gaze escaped. Prepare, sisters. Weave hope anew, that we might break free this accursed web, born of our naive foundation. As Weave Nest Atla's lore tablet suggests, the weave nests were shrouded in some warding power that blinded them to Grandmother Silk's vision. There's a theory that the Grandmother is physically blind, that she instead sees through the vibrations in her silken strands, and that she senses the subtle aura of soul emanating from others. The weavers might have learned to cut her vision to protect their secret enterprise. Within these weave nests can be found benches, silk-powered blueprints, advanced technologies, and laboratories. Rebel weavers experimented with their own silk skills to develop weapons with which they might overthrow their mother. The snare setter, a trap that factors into one of Silksong's endings, proves that the weavers were close to finding an answer, but as the mysterious Ava, herself one of their experiments, explains. There, my mothers built their tools, all traps and bindings, small things, but tests for larger forms. I still remember their thoughts as they worked, their desperation and their hunger, another hopeless attempt to wrest their freedom. All ended in failure, of course. Second was the creation of Ava. This character is one of Silksong's more opaque and warrants a video in her own right, but we'll discuss her briefly. Hide her deep, the despised child, our shame shown in shell of iron. She is a wish cast vain, divinity mocked in form too frail. Ava was perhaps the weaver's attempt to spin a being made entirely from silk. The only other creature remotely comparable was the primordial source herself. Their vanity pushed the weavers to believe they could fight fire with fire. For many reasons, their attempt failed, and the delicate Ava remained in her iron cage. Again, the exact timeline is vague, but it could be during her war with the weavers that the Grandmother tried her own hand at spinning creatures entirely born from silk. The result was the sisters Phantom and Lace. She spun us to fade, she spun us to break. Why us, sister? Why us? This silk memory within the exhaust organ is Phantom questioning her existence to Lace. Phantom was Mother Silk's first cruel attempt, and a success only in part. Over time, Phantom's silk stretched thin and her shell stiffened. Hers is a long but still transient life. Lace, meanwhile, is a form pristine. So long as she has access to silk stores to replenish, she remains swift, immortal. Look of a child and a mind to match, but hers been up wandering the Citadel longer than most. Even in its long silence, way 'fore you came and roused its ire. These words from the first shrine caretaker suggest Lace is much older than most, supporting the idea that she could have been spun in a time before the weavers disappeared. But then again, the Grandmother's own words from Lace's silk heart memory reveal, better a child spun frail than none, better a child spun purer than them, one to wish our waking, from our silk, a child born loyal. So not only did the Grandmother wish to replace weavers with children completely loyal to her, but she spun them to wish her own waking. This would suggest Phantom and Lace were woven after the Grandmother's imprisonment, though how and how long after isn't quite clear. The Pale Monarch's ire was too great for many weavers, so began their ancient diaspora. Entire clans of sisters fled Pharloom to distant lands where they might escape the pull of Grandmother Silk. We see in ruined weave nest Sindril at the fringes of the kingdom a weaver rune that maps regions beyond Pharloom. Close by rests a rune harp artifact that recorded one weaver's plea. Flee, sisters, Flee until your strength exhausts. So far you may escape at last her silken sight. To start anew, to sustain, free of web and service eternal. Pharloom was depopulated of weavers as sisters scurried to freedom. This ties into the lore surrounding the original Hollow Knight and sheds light on the arrival in Deep Nest of Hera and her weaver sisters. From Pharloom they came to the fringes of Hallownest, and this is just one more reason that explains why they never submitted to the Pale King's rule. They had just cut ties with Grandmother Silk, so it's understandable the weavers would be apprehensive of another pale being. Hallownest was just one of several destinations for weavers in exile. Those that remained carried a solemn burden to continue the fight against the god. Grandmother Silk mobilized immense force against the weavers in the battle for Pharloom. It's safe to assume that many bugs remained enthralled to her will. Also, as the primal source of silk and the being that gave them their power, it's hard to imagine all weavers could free themselves from slavery. But many did, and they used their inherited domineering aura to press lesser bugs into rebellious service. The bugs of your land, I have watched them, climbing towards their absolution without the flicker of a thought to what it means. Aye, but isn't it always such for those snared to serve your higher caste? Our mortal mob did once act some defiance, unawares maybe, but successful in part, goaded toward it by the weaver's will. Talking with the Maskmaker uncovers this subtle hint that the mortal bugs of Pharloom rallied to the weaver's call to lay low a god. As many believed the weavers divine, it took little coaxing. For unknown days, months, years perhaps, the war-torn kingdom suffered, but eventually the weavers succeeded in doing the impossible. They cast down their pale monarch. Though Grandmother Silk was defeated, she wasn't destroyed. Killing their source of silk might spell the weavers' own doom. Their time spent experimenting and crafting within the weave nests resulted in a plan. Using their combined silk and ability, the weavers played magically charged harmonies to lull Grandmother Silk into a deep and unnatural slumber. Wrapped in a cocoon of silk, placed inside a cradle at the summit of Pharloom's Citadel of Song, the pale monarch would remain indefinitely. The tethers that enslaved them were severed. The weavers and their allies rejoiced in victory, and as peace settled, it ushered in another era for Pharloom. In fact, both the cradle and the Citadel of Song were constructed for one purpose: Mother Silk's imprisonment. This would suggest the Citadel, its grandeur, and its reputation didn't predate her slumber, but rather arose because of it. The weavers faced two challenges in the wake of war. First was that their trap required continuous streams of magically empowered silk, combined with a lullaby sung indefinitely. If they faltered, the pale being would wake, an eternal task. Second was that the weavers were themselves depleted in number and power, and couldn't maintain their role forever. As Ava relates, "My mothers shared the curse of their tribe. To conceive a child is a painful, near impossible task." Put simply, the weavers slipped towards extinction. A solution to both problems took form in the Citadel of Song and its demanding religion. You speak of the Citadel. Its former function has failed, but I can still sense its purpose some. It is church and cage both. Aye, devised by your ancestors that monstrosity, and their wicked, clever minds. A system, or a web they'd likely call it, a way to keep their mother sealed in slumber and themselves free to lavish in their false rule. The weavers that remained in Pharloom usurped the position of deity from Grandmother Silk and basked in dominion. From the weaver effigy artifacts scattered through Pharloom, bone idols of weaver forms, we get a sense of the Citadel's religious fervor. The effigies speak of Camera, Kilal, and Atla, each weaver tied to a distinct vocation or foundational system. Atla, for example, was the weaver of time, and the description of her effigy reads, "By grace of your example, and our history held full in mind, our song is yours, as your name is sacred. Weaver Atla, may you be praised eternal." The history spoken of, however, wasn't the truth. The weavers used their power over will and silk to launch a propaganda campaign and revision of past events so that the memory of Grandmother Silk faded with subsequent generations, and that Pharloom would ultimately know only the superiority of the weavers. But the weavers themselves had to adjust to this new age and tame base impulse. 2 lore tablets found in Mossholm and Shellwood speak of how mortal bugs must be looked after, must be protected rather than hunted. Sister, spider, husk bound to moss, watch over these bugs born low, raised up by fervor fostered, born and caught within our web unknowing. Watch over these bugs passing safe, warded by fear, no longer your meal. As its influence expanded, the weavers founded 3 co-equal orders within the Citadel of Song to preserve the mission long after their own deaths: the conductors, the vault keepers, and the architects. The conductors were to become Pharloom's stewards. As inheritors of the weaver's duty, they were charged with guiding the kingdom's future, directing its decisions, and ensuring the Silksong that kept the Pale Monarch asleep never silenced. As this rune harp, given to conductor Balador before the last weaver's death, relates, "Sisters, spiders, the burden is past. These simple bugs shall bear it full, never to cease, never to silence." The Vault Keepers, as their Hunter's Journal entry reads, were high caste bugs responsible for delivering sermons and leading prayer for those beyond the walls of the Whispering Vaults, to root out and condemn those not seen as sufficiently fervent. The Vault Keepers documented and preserved Pharloom's history to better educate its present. The Architects, the last group created, are also the most interesting of the 3. They aren't bugs at all, at least in the traditional sense. The Architects, and those under their jurisdiction, are automatons, creations of cogwork meant to imitate life. Its core is filled with fine mechanisms, but that alone should not produce such a convincing mimic of life. Silk must also be used to animate this artifice, though exactly how, I am not sure. The Cogwork Choirbug's journal entry suggests advanced technology, an intricate twining of silk and steel to produce artificial life. The Architects built and administered Pharloom's Cogwork core, the beating heart of the Citadel that ensured all programs ran smoothly, all defenses and tasks were in order. By the time Hornet arrives in Pharloom, only 1 architect remains, but from its words we can imagine the gleaming early days of their order. Impressive, industrious, eternal. You have seen a glimpse, Bug Red, of us, how we once were, the minds of architects inspired, what majesty we did create. So, an elaborate caste system to assist the weavers in maintaining their prison took shape. Weavers, known as the First Children, stood above all other bugs. Beneath them were the 3 factions. Then came the devout choristers, clergy and priests of the Citadel, who organized the ranks of devout soldiers. Laborers in the forges, underworks and factories next. Lowest were the simple pilgrims, their sin yet judged, and their zeal yet proven. Faith offered both subservience and manpower. The Citadel's religion provided endless streams of pilgrims to perform vital tasks the dwindling number of weavers couldn't maintain alone. And all wrapped in a simple package, to cleanse sin through work, to sustain Pharloom eternal. Not all was offered willingly, and one of the Architect's first creations were the Clockwork Sentinels, a gleaming order, Clockwork Sentinels so impressive, majestic in function, they were charged, bound to the highest holy duty. Long before the creation of the core, the Sentinels ventured even beyond these walls to see all bugs brought, forced, safe to serve the Citadel. Those who didn't flock to the chime of church bells were brought as slaves by force. With their solution built, with their citadel humming with the eternal song of imprisonment, the last strength of the weavers evaporated. Dozens of communities spread to distant lands, always with the hope of one day returning. The handful that remained prepared their final resting place. Weaver shrines dot Pharloom and are interesting sights. Seemingly hewn from stone or else fossilized remains of a weaver's body, they both honor a life gone and preserve the spiritual essence of the deceased. The weavers interred are suspended between life and death. Though they have long since decayed physically, the weaver shrines carry their lingering silk memories and just enough soul to perhaps see them resurrected in a future where the variables are right. Their longing is aroused when Hornet approaches the shrines. As each activates, it tells her, "Daughter of a distant land, we who remained have waited long. Bind our strength to yours, reclaim the future of our haunted kingdom." With that, the first children disappeared. Their duty was passed to the mortal bugs of Pharloom. The Citadel of Song reverberated with thousands of voices and harmonies that kept a pale being in slumber, and slowly, the truth drowned beneath a tide of dogma and indoctrination. For a brief period, Pharloom hummed as intended, but soon, time crushed the Citadel of Song's purpose beyond recognition. The Weaver's memory, a blind shepherd whose flock strayed as days from their absence progressed. This shrinking of knowledge brought a period painted dark by the Citadel's oppression, its corruption, and its exploitation of the masses. Over time, choristers and leading members of the clergy accrued immeasurable wealth in the tithes gathered from lower castes. They manipulated notions of sin and penance to force many bugs into lightless servitude. As this tablet in the Marrow states, "Pilgrim, you are blessed to walk the foundations of Pharloom. Humble yourself before the shells of those who gave their lives to hold our kingdom's weight." Miners forged in the heat of deep docks, the spinsters of Greymoor reaped and reamed on penalty of death. The soot-filled citadel underworks scrubbed endlessly. Various other lore tablets illustrate how deeply deference to the citadel was ingrained in the culture. Litany of the Worker. May we catch the dregs and never tire. May we clean the dregs and never hunger. May we spool the dregs and never falter. At the 7th bell toll, send 30 measures, 4 beats smoke rock, 8 beats sweet smelt, mark of fealty all workers. Disobedience wasn't permitted. All served the idea of Pharloom eternal, but as the age passed, ambition stained its intent. In this time, Pharloom society was cleanly divided into the haves and have-nots. The Citadel members basked in opulence. The religion of the Weavers was seized by the 3 factions. As inheritors of the blessed work, maintaining the pale monarch's slumber, these factions themselves grew semi-divine in the eyes of citizens, and their power bloomed. But power tends to corrupt. Faith and economy were inextricably linked, and the Citadel manipulated both. A pilgrim, drawn by the peal of the bells, arrived at the kingdom's bottom and was made to endure a grueling climb to the top. Pilgrim, accept the judgment of the rise beyond, that all who stand at Pharloom's holy crest prove pure of will and want. A journey supposed to cleanse through adversity sin from the believer, but ultimately killed most. Settlements and trade nodes sprang up along pilgrim routes. Farfields, the halfway house of Greymoor, the grand Bellheart, offered brief respite. Here, the poor traded in symbols of faith, rosary beads. As seen by the loot dropped upon their death compared to members of the Citadel, these citizens were destitute. So what drove them? All believed in the myth of the Citadel, a paradise where clean water flowed, where food and safety and companionship were plenty. To be accepted through its gates was a citizen's goal and injected the strength to continue. Since the Weaver's disappearance, much of the pilgrims' route had grown wild and dangerous, but as they neared the blasted steps, the Citadel's gilded judges loomed over them, offering both protection and judgment. These soldiers tested the faith of the pilgrims, and the last judge stood as final arbiter before the Citadel's grand gate. The sinless gained entry, the sinful perished. Stunned by the grandeur and majesty of the Citadel, pilgrims were ushered in. They believed their trials over, but they had just begun. They were loaded into a massive elevator, and as you can see in the map, it only has space to go down. The bugs weren't risen to leisure, but rather plunged into the underworks, where they were made to take up brush, mill, wool, and serve Pharloom eternal. A sentiment of many can be heard in dialogue with the pitiful creature, Loam. Me cannot rest, us works, and Citadel breathes, and thems above do sing, and all is right, and when us works enough, them sees it, and us gets us holy reward. The Citadel, most miracle of a place, bright and holy, fresh water for all, much as can drink, air so clean can see the great roofs above. Even those who did ascend to the Citadel's upper reaches were made to carry on the burden of Mother Silk's slumber. The choristers and envoys of the Citadel led lavish lives compared to most bugs, but they too were slaves of the system the Weavers had created. Initiates were made to veil their faces as symbol of devotion to the choir. Now, this is an interesting detail. We know from speaking with the mask makers in both Hallownest and Pharloom that a bug's mask greatly influences their identity, their memory, their individuality. It could be that by taking up the cloth, Citadel bugs lost themselves to a greater cause that demanded absolute obedience. The conductors were first among the Citadel. Their commandments dictated what all other factions would pursue. The Vault Keepers preached religious fervor. They taught future generations of obligations and duties, and tried to preserve lost knowledge. And the first architects, themselves automatons, manufactured increasingly intricate robots to work the core. At some period, perhaps in this time, the Citadel recruited 3 famed sisters, 3 master pinstresses, to train their choral members in the way of pin and needle. As their martial prowess grew, the Citadel of Song's authoritarian grip continued to squeeze neighboring regions as much as those within its own kingdom. As time slipped, as silk grew scarce without weavers to produce it, and as generations of bugs died, an existential question emerged. How could the Citadel serve its eternal purpose if its bugs were mortal? A solution came in 2 prongs, one of which can be found in the ghastly surgical bays of White Ward. Here, bugs were seduced by the promise of immortality and carried out experiments using the power of soul imbued within silk. Have you done it yet, bell ringer? Wriggled deep, discovered the depths of obsession that brought this place so low. If you speak of this Citadel and its silk, caretaker, then yes, I now know the start of it. In the ward down below I saw it clear, the hollowed husks and the many torturous implements. Machines to instill a bug with thread that would see their life extended. Aye, that's it in part, but there's more scale to it than all that. Just think of them greedily shoving the silk into their shells. The madness that overcame them. Eternal life for mortal bugs. Then think on how long it's all gone on. Citadel surgeons began infusing silk into the shells of the choir so that they could continue the endless task forever. Just as the Citadel was a machine to gather labor, so too did it become a machine to recycle silk and souls. As the sinister oath of the White Ward reads, "While song must be sung, none may falter. Infirmity, sickness, death, all are banished from our citadel. Death became a sin and was not an end to work. As this surgical room hints, the lumaflies that flutter throughout Pharloom are, in fact, the silken filaments of a deceased soul. Nita Lin reveals the pained memories. Please remember my voice, to serve beyond shell, to devote eternal. Why this pain? Must we? Dying bugs had their souls reaped. Then their corpses were piled high to be burned in these roaring chambers below. What happened to these souls connects to the second prong of the Church's solution, transcendence through artificial life. And lo is eternity sustained. By architect's claw we welcome that final form, of dial and rotor and soul gladly given, the perfect unfaltering voice. Architects charged their cogwork creations with lumaflies. Automatons were powered by a bug's soul. We see this when lumaflies escape a broken cogwork creation. And in the Hunter's Journal of many cogwork enemies, there are hints that these artifacts are more than unfeeling metal. The decision to utilize silk, to literally weave it into their own bodies, was an inflection point in the Citadel's history that ultimately brought its ruin. It's here, I believe, that Grandmother Silk began to stir from her slumber. As the primal source of silk, the pale being is entwined with all Pharloom's threads, and even weakened as she was, retained some influence over it. This is where I think the subtle signs of the haunting first began. Heart of the haunting, long lulled to slumber and desperate to wake. The higher being's threads stretched throughout Pharloom, snaring its bugs and driving them to madness and discord. Although most bugs state that the haunting is a relatively recent event when Hornet comes to Pharloom, the decline appears gradual. It parallels the takeover of another higher being, the Radiance, that assaulted through dreams the bugs of Hallownest. The Radiance's infection that ravaged Hallownest began first as images presented to sleeping bugs, stirred their minds to frenzy. It wasn't until much later that the infection burst forth in earnest, just as the haunting has done in Pharloom. I'd like to take a moment to analyze the poem Pharloom's Folly, written by conductor Romino, that shows in the first cutscene of the game. They see your beauty, so frail and fine. They see your peace, woven of faith and toil. They forget your heart, bound in slumber and servitude. When you wake, they shall see your truth, a beast's nature, bare to all. This is a poem about the kingdom of Pharloom as much as it is about its pale monarch. Grandmother Silk and her land inseparable. Bugs saw the beauty and opportunity present in silk. They coveted the resource. Their religion and eternal service created a rigid society that enforced peace. But the true folly of which Romino speaks is the Citadel believing it ruled it all, believing it could control or exploit the kingdom's silk. In generations, they've forgotten the bestial nature of their monarch's heart, and on her waking, all would be revealed in destruction. But they also forgot the nature and heart of Pharloom. It's a machine built to harvest the souls and the labors of the pilgrims. As a conductor, Romino was privy to restricted information, and that he speaks of such topics suggests it was written before the haunting completely consumed Pharloom. The irony is that few bugs would understand the warning laced within his writing, and shortly came the madness. The first signs were invisible, in insidious decay, small whispers, not their own, in the back of the Citadel's mind, that lured them from the path towards destruction. This brings us to an interesting object, found discarded in the darkness of whispering vaults, the pious Isomor. This mechanical statue is one of a pilgrim, and its likeness can actually be seen in the background in Bone Bottom. Once awakened, Isamor welcomes pilgrims upon being accepted into the Citadel, offers kind words but also a harsh warning. Pilgrim, cast aside those many sinful hopes for rest and reward. Remain pure within our midst. Ask for nothing. See the Citadel's simple stone, bare and unadorned. See how plain our garb, how sparse our meal. Know that excess is sin. Stay vigilant. For those wretched pilgrims who dare relent their base desires, left unpunished, thin our pure chorus, their seductive sin spread like flame. In its first form, the clergy shunned ostentation and wealth as sin, but with Grandmother Silk's threads corrupting their minds, the Citadel turned against its old view. As it grew opulent, it decommissioned the statue that pointed out hypocrisy. What's more interesting is that, at least to me, there's a suspiciously large space on the right-hand side of the room where the statues of conductors, vault keepers, and architects sing the threefold melody. Perhaps there was a fourth faction, dedicated to the pilgrims, the fuel of Pharloom, that didn't survive the Citadel's decay, and pious Isamor banished. The church's corruption was mirrored by its surrounding environs. The regions, now known as Bilewater and the Putrefied Ducts, were once pristine. Their waters carried nourishment rather than toxin. Waste produced by the Citadel was disposed into these sluiceways, and shortly they transformed into rotting swamps. This, at least in part, is why the Stillkin, Bilewater's natives, turned fiercely rebellious against the church. A domino effect threw the path of Sinner's Road into a muck-maggot-infested nightmare, and a constant, grim drizzle forever clouded Greymore. It's around this time where Verdania, the great kingdom already mentioned, might have fallen to blight. In vain effort to spare the land's glory, one of Verdania's princes agreed to aid the Citadel of Song. His genius created cogwork masterpieces used by the architects, but the price was his body and soul. All was for naught, as Verdania died shortly after its prince. His lover, the Green Prince, wallowed in misery and went searching for his lost mate, but heavy with resignation, decided to languish after his capture in Sinner's Road. And Scarsinger Carmelita exhausted her voice to sing a melody that resisted the haunting. These fields still display life and growth, even as the lands around erode to dust. There's a hot harmony here that eludes the gray wastes above and the dry marrow beside. The Hunter's March was protected behind Carmelita's aura, but her mortal strength couldn't outlast an immortal being. Even the disciplined and eusocial Scar colony succumbed to the Citadel's and, now by extension, Grandmother Silk's designs. From the mottled Scar's needle in, strength faded, all for her, the last, loyal, loved. Why this way? As Grandmother Silk's influence seeped into the Citadel of Song, her desires molded its apparatus. It could be, at this time, that veiled envoys and choristers were dispatched to lands beyond to gather the first children that escaped long ago. Rune-infused cages were used to capture weavers and their descendants, though for what purpose is up to speculation. It could be that the Pale Monarch needed the weaver's silk, or their presence, to completely undo the spell that kept her dreaming. Or it could be the weavers were drained of their silk to further White Ward's infusions. The Citadel also turned on its own. Those of sufficient will to resist haunting whispers, or those without silk in their shells, were hunted down by members of the choir. The most notable victims were the Pinstress sisters. They fought a valiant retreat and escaped from the Citadel. The sisters parting hid in Pharloom's reaches. One to the swamps of Bilewater, one to the blasted steppes, and one to the far fields. They were heavily pursued. The fourth chorus, a massive cogwork creation, was sent to destroy one sister, but she defeated it, then donned the humble guise of a seamstress. Others within the church were excised. We hear in the Maestro's Hunter's Journal, once they summoned song from their subjects. Now they rise only to command an end to those unstrung. Some defiance emerged from beyond the Citadel's gates. A snail shaman, a seeker, attempted to gather allies and overthrow the Veiled Ones, but met his doom in bile water. Braver than most, and as little a fan of this citadel as you yourself, went seek an alliance with those basic bugs of the swamps. Thought they'd both gain from the union, scheming defiance or some such stupidity. Grohl the Great, chieftain of the Stilkin tribe, killed the shaman and took the power over Soul as his own, which we can see in the soul blasts he sends during the boss fight. Their shells are ours, their souls are ours. Our hate is forever. Hate for the light, hate for their pins, for their waste poured thick and endless. Fill your hearts with hate, for power has now been claimed, and with it we shall punish. These lore tablets tell of Bilewater's unending contempt for the Citadel, and they rebelled against its control. When the haunting broke in earnest, nearly all were ensnared in Grandmother Silk's web. The Citadel of Song fell into muffled silence. Their grand project to preserve Pharloom eternal lasted generations but came to naught as the pale monarch prepared for her liberation. The kingdom was ruined. Safety disappeared. Hope was fleeting. But still, the myth of the Citadel brought weak pilgrims to be swallowed by its maws. Though it's not stated how much time separates the events of Hollow Knight from Silksong, enough has passed for Hornet to mature into her full power and grow comfortable with her abilities. From some lore tidbits, we learn she tried intimate relationships, but always outlived her companions. As a descendant of weavers with half their blood flowing through her, Hornet gained the attention of Grandmother Silk's citadel. More than that, she was a pale child, a daughter of a higher being. These two combined made Hornet a great prize if she were captured. Full chamber to the kingdom of the White Worm. Claim the weaver in half part, last of their line, sensed strong with silk. Resistance anticipated, quell with rune cage. This choral commandment, passed down by the conductors, sent a delegation, a full chamber, the greatest combined force to hunt a weaver, to Hallownest. They set upon the Red Princess, and though she likely slew dozens, Hornet was captured by the power of their runes, her own rendered inert. And so it is that we come to Pharloom's present day and the events of Silksong, as the choristers bring Hornet across the kingdom's borders. A pale lumafly alights on her cage and blesses the weaver child enough power to break her chains. The company crashes into the depths of Pharloom. Hornet wakes in Moss Grotto severely injured and drained of much of her silk. She speaks to the chapel maid about her captors, who reveals they were agents of the Citadel, veiled and somber, that carry out a mysterious charge. Hornet won't be free of their pursuit until she uncovers their purpose and their interest in her. This task means she must brave the Pilgrim's Path, now overrun with dangers, and enter the Citadel of Song. But the maiden and other timid pilgrims huddled around Bone Bottom also warn of a mysterious curse that has gripped dying Pharloom and incensed its people to madness. As mentioned, the haunting is the result of Grandmother Silk's stirring. Her unconscious mind sends out threads of silk. It calls to itself and ensnares weak wills. The children born of them, and all the pilgrims after, the silk has seeped deep into this kingdom's shells, generations deep. No wonder Pharloom's bugs proved such easy prey for that haunted thread. It had only to seek for itself to reach them. The haunting has turned many in Pharloom into slaves of Grandmother Silk, working tirelessly to wake their ancient god. But for many more, the weight of a pale being has utterly crushed their minds. They've transformed into raving monsters, or else repeat their tasks in an endless, unthinking daze. Pavo, mayor of Belhart, tells Hornet this of his experience enthralled by the haunting. It is difficult, upsetting even to think. Strange, sad memories, not my own, and my own thoughts smothered amidst the tangle. And in Deep Docks, Forge Daughter says, "You've met the workers. They're all wound up. They still work at their tasks in a simple way, but they're useless for conversation. It's only ourselves and young Ballo with any sense left." It's through this harrowing trek Hornet must, like a penitent pilgrim, journey. The Citadel's main gate will only open if the chimes of 5 separate bells scattered along the pilgrim road ring out. As she travels, Hornet rescues a bell beast nearly ensnared by haunted Silk. As thanks, the creature offers itself as ride through the bellways connecting Pharloom that once echoed with activity. She also crosses paths with another foreigner to the kingdom, Chakra, a warrior and cartographer in search of her mentor who provides aid, maps, and companionship to Hornet. Shortly into her mission, Hornet confronts Lace, the silk-born being and daughter of the Pale Monarch. Lace's character is complex and deep enough to warrant her own video, but she observes Hornet's climb through Pharloom. She has contempt for the Weaver's child, but is also curious to see how Hornet will fare against her mother. Several times she demonstrates her sword skill and challenges Hornet directly in combat. First imbued with the desire to see her mother freed, Lace begins to resent Grandmother Silk and her own existence. Hornet covers the hot thickets of far fields, travels through the damp looms of Greymoor to arrive in Belhart. Here, she witnesses firsthand and up close the terrible power of the haunting. Belhart's residents are suspended in air, bound, writhing on silk as their minds are imprisoned by a lilting melody, the source of which seems surprisingly close. Hornet herself isn't immune to the haunting, as we see if she rests at the bench and then reloads the game. Before she goes further, Hornet takes responsibility for liberating the village. After a short journey through verdant Shellwood, the Crimson Hero reaches Belhart's upper levels and comes to a surprising sight. The source of the town's misery is a binding of silk strummed by a living weaver. Widow is, like Hornet, foreign to these lands and was brought as a prisoner to Pharloom. In the cradle, where many rune-bound cages lie, we find one with the inscription, "Weaver in quarter part, last of their line, staked to service, tracked and taken beneath the city of steel, 8 choristers, 12 envoys lost to task." Though not explicitly stated, I believe this references Widow, as she's staked to service and the only weaver mentioned from those captured to still be alive. After she was brought to Pharloom, the Citadel broke her and transformed Widow into a zealot. Her body seemed a weaver's, but her mask had been forcibly removed and her own silk was bound useless by heavy pins lodged through her spine. There's an interpretation that Widow is actually the last of the weavers that remained rather than a prisoner brought. She refers to Hornet as a child of those who dared to flee, which might suggest she didn't leave Pharloom. And her silk memory within the cradle reads in part, "Of the first, the last," though this doesn't necessarily prove she remained. In any case, stripped of mask and silk, Widow was no match for the grandmother's aura and became enthralled. Rather than sing to keep the Pale Monarch asleep, she now strums to awaken her god. Our mother, true, our light divine, wake, 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 glory to you. She prepares Belhart for the Monarch's coming by binding them to the haunting. Widow attempts to convert Hornet and offers fierce, bestial attacks, but Hornet defeats her and acquires the ancient weaver's skill of the Nida Lin. The ability to play music is what gave the weavers power over other bugs, and it was vital in preserving the grandmother's slumber. Hornet's use of the Nida Lin gives her access to derelict weave nests, unique dialogue and insights of bugs that sing to her harmony, and also memories of others preserved in silk. With Widow defeated, Belhart's free from the haunting and offers Hornet warm accommodations. Here, Her journey can branch in two different routes. The first takes her through the sand-battered ruins of the blasted steppes, the last challenge for pilgrims seeking audience with the Citadel. Worms infest the dunes, crazed bugs scurry on the walkways, and the judges of old stand in stone silence, immune to the winds. As the Hunter's Journal relates, judges remorselessly eliminate any pilgrim or passerby deemed impure to their sight. The countless husks strewn on paths beside them tell of their conclusive decisions. And we can venture into a small chamber within the steppes, once used as a recruitment and training center for the judges. A tablet there tells of their mission. Bug born of Pharloom, you have been chosen. May our citadel's holy gilding harden your soft shell. Stand eternal as our arbiter, that no bug-bearing sin shall step within our sacred halls. The ultimate test for pilgrims is the last judge. A massive bug who stands as arbiter for any pilgrims fortunate enough to reach the Citadel's gate. But unfortunately, the last judge sees sin in most bugs and deems them unworthy of the Citadel's mythic splendor with a swift death. Ringing the 5 bells, defeating the last judge, and playing the needle in opens the Citadel's mystery to Hornet. There is an alternate path, a hidden back door into the Citadel. A dangerous, twisted path used by Pharloom's sinners. It's the only hope for bugs that know they'll be judged impure. This path takes Hornet through the aptly named Sinner's Road and into the exhaust organ. The organ, tended by Lace's sibling Phantom, is where filamentous silk and the soul dregs of dead bugs are gathered to be recycled by the church, and where the Citadel's own exhaust belches out. The organ is surrounded by a labyrinthine, dreamlike haze, known as the Mist. Wraiths patrol the thick fog, anguished specters of lingering thread, not a bug, but a projection of another's will in smog and silk. Their needle-in monologues are filled with warning. Trespassers aren't wanted. I think the Wraiths are projections of Phantom's will rather than the Grand Mother. The steward of the exhaust organ wants to wallow in forgotten solitude. And also, the Wraiths share similar appearance to Phantom's own shape. Navigating the mist brings Hornet into a confrontation with Lace's sibling. Phantom desires a brilliant death in combat, and Hornet delivers, opening a path up to the Grand Bellway Station in the Citadel of Song. Behind the gate, there is beauty and sadness. The Citadel is an impressive structure of tall spires and grand chambers supported by cogwork technology, unequaled anywhere in bug kind. Its grandeur is snuffed by collapse. The halls are filled only with corpses. A blanket of silk coats everything, and most importantly, it's silent. The eternal song of Pharloom is no more. It isn't until Hornet approaches Lace again, this time hinting at her mother's pale being's status and power, that a crude form of life returns to the Citadel. The shrieks of Grandmother Silk's awakening send strands of silk that bind to the shells and husks of Pharloom's fallen, energizing them with her purpose. Attempting the lift plunges Hornet into the sooty crawl spaces of the underworks, where slaves labor eternally with the hope of being elevated, a hope that's always dashed. A hole, however, in the Grand Gate wall opens up the coral chambers for Hornet. And after dispatching many veiled bugs and automated guards, she reaches the first shrine. The bell within has been bound by silk for long. Freeing and activating it sends a chime that echoes throughout the land. That bell has rung out far and wide. The wretched and the lost will have heard its call. They'll be making their way here now. This shrine awakened. It calls out to them, you see. It's safe here, come on over. Ringing in the ears of every lost pilgrim and grubby so-and-so, unlucky enough to have made it to this blasted citadel with their wits intact. So says the caretaker of the first shrine, a shrouded figure who wishes to maintain his anonymity. He pretends to be a simple bug, but is something far greater. More on him later. The first shrine, populated with pilgrims, becomes the haven of Songclave. Hornet must next challenge the cogwork dancers that guard the lift to the cradle above. These automatons are lethal, beautiful, and tragic. The Green Prince's partner and co-ruler of Verdania gave his soul and skill to create the cogwork dancers. They are simulacrums of the pair, their love for one another and their prowess. The gilded threshold, to dance our duty, our honor, our peace. With the dancer's destruction, the Green Prince's lover is finally freed, and so too is the lift to the cradle opened. It's locked, however, and the key is found in performance of the threefold melody. Each of the Citadel's ruling factions held a part of the melody. Now, they've almost slipped from memory, but small clues guide Hornet through the Citadel to acquire their songs. The Whispering Vaults, haunted stacks and shelves of scrolls that contain Pharloom's written history, are home to the Vault Keepers. Though most of their scholars have succumbed to death or madness, Vault Keeper Cardinius retains a shred of his sanity. Dead your vicious kind are meant to be, better methinks to stay as such, but this one was taught, it shall fold its claws, it shall pass its knowledge as much as is gleaned. Only to a first child must a Vault Keeper defer. It seems many bugs despise the Weaver's rule, but still, the Keepers are duty-bound to the first children, and he offers guidance to Hornet. Though Cardinius doesn't possess the melody, his old master did. Hornet gathers the sacred cylinder from the Keeper's corpse and plays the tune on their recording device. The Architect's melody can be found at the top of the cogwork core, the internal heart of machinery that keeps the Citadel beating. But it wasn't meant to be traversed by bugs, and Hornet must first gather her ancestors' clawline technique to safely navigate the whirring gears. This skill, found at a weaver's shrine in Underwork's cauldron, also brings Hornet into the presence of the last remaining architect. This little automaton diligently continues its programmed duty, but age has slowly broken it down. I am an architect, only an architect. To build, automate is not choice. It is our nature, directive, cage. This snippet of dialogue suggests that cogwork creations, powered by the souls of dead bugs, can develop individuality, and that this architect sees its purpose as a prison. When Hornet asks of its melody, it tells her, "Yes, there was a melody once, but its sound, that I possess no longer. Too long I have worked. From my mind vault, the imprint has faded. With many things it is like this, remembrance dimmed." It directs her to the top of the core, where an automated chorus built to bellow their melody remains in a decommissioned state. Activating the system grants Hornet the Architect's song. The last melody is found in the dizzying spires of the high halls where the conductors once steered Pharloom's eternal directive. By the will of the conductors we once boomed, and this citadel shook at our decree. But the words, how hollow they echoed. The mantle of rule claimed greedily from Pharloom's fading first children, those bitter weavers. It was yoke, not crown. Ministers and maestros, twisted by the haunting, patrol the spike-studded passageways. The forum, once a gathering point for those beneath the conductors to receive their duties, now stands as a gauntlet of powerful enemies guarding conductor Balador, last of his line. Balador is at death's door, sustained only by the life support apparatus that feeds his shell vital silk. His form is obscured by a curtain, and the only other conductor we see is the one reanimated as part of the unraveled horde in White Ward. Balador's words are filled with remorse. He's seen how far the Citadel has fallen, how he's failed his duty and allowed Mother Silk to awaken, and her haunting to take his fellows. Balador holds the rune harp with the last words of the Weavers, the solemn duty passed from first children to their successors. Only too late did he learn the reality. Now, in our Citadel's silence, we share their truth. Only one monarch's claws ever clutched this kingdom, though we raised our voices to cry otherwise. He gladly offers Hornet his weakened melody in hopes that she may right their wrong and save Pharloom from its pale monarch. With the threefold melody gathered in full and played before the faction's automatons, Hornet opens the cradle lift and prepares to confront a god. One final hurdle stands in the way: Lace. The grandmother's silk-spun daughter threatens Hornet once again with her flashing pin. Why her, mother? See me cut, see me serve? A child too broken. I will not fade, I will not take. See me, your knight? See me, your daughter. Lace's needle-in dialogue grants insight to a child who feels she's not good enough for her mother. Lace already believed her existence was flawed, but to see her own mother desire another is too much for her. Her thoughts align with Lace's words for Hornet following defeat. Head on, climb up and away. You've earned your audience with the divine. Face the Holy Mother who would fashion so cruel and crude a daughter as me. After all, it's you that she wants, is it not? There are a few interpretations for Grandmother Silk's interest in Hornet. The first is vengeance. The descendant of Weavers, those vile creatures that imprisoned her, Mother Silk might want to torture and destroy Hornet as recompense. But the grandmother is a pale being who wishes to see her kingdom restored and to hear her subjects' exultations. As both Weaver and Worm, Hornet would make a formidable lieutenant should she be bound to Silk's will. A final motive is that Hornet represents a threatening source of power. The grandmother is waking from ages-old slumber. She's weak and vulnerable. Hornet's own magically charged silk stores can be ripped from her shell to bolster the grandmother. As the offspring of a pale being, Hornet is one of the few who can challenge Silk directly and poses an immediate risk to her return. As Hornet mentions earlier to the seamstress, "They hunt me for my nature, for the silk produced within my shell. Not for themselves, but for the one atop it all." Throughout Hornet's journey, the Weaver Princess acquires 3 silk hearts. These magically infused bundles restore Hornet's ability to regenerate silk within her shell, and offer much more. Each pulses with the power of the dream and offers a slight glimpse into silk memories. As mentioned, the haunting binds all ensnared bugs to the will of Grandmother Silk. While possessed, their minds aren't their own, but rather weighed down by the pale monarch's wishes as she slumbers. As Hornet ascends to each silk heart, the voice of Grandmother Silk can be heard. The first, gathered after liberating and subduing the Bell Beast, reads in part, "Arrived at last, our silk, our nature, we feel it. Come, child, witness our waking." From this, we can intuit that the grandmother was alerted to Hornet's presence as soon as she arrived in Pharloom, and that Hornet's nature roused the pale being from her sleep. The second, ripped from the silk-animated corpses of the unraveled and White Ward, tells us this: "Their voices, their memory, bind their shells, bind their souls, bind them all. To devote eternal, one mind, one union, they are ours, bound forever." This sheds light on the corruption and downfall of the Citadel of Song. Once bugs injected silk into their shells, they were unknowingly chained to servitude, and they lost the path laid out for them by the Weavers. The final silk heart, taken from Lace at the foot of the cradle, tells us of a mother's desire for her child, and the motive behind Lace's creation. Better a child spun mad than none. Better a child spun frail than none. Better a child spun pure than them. One to wish our waking, from our silk a child born loyal. Pained by her first children's rebellion, the grandmother wove a beautiful yet imperfect daughter, one she hoped would free her and heap devotion upon her. In any event, Hornet ascends the cradle. Broken harps, shattered halls, empty ruined cages litter the floor, and challenges Grandmother Silk, who's wrapped in a cocoon that pulses with power. Their fight climactic, the pale being demonstrates complete mastery of thread, pin, and needle, the power she commands on display in her shredding grasp, which I believe is the only attack that deals 3 masks of damage. Interestingly, Grandmother Silk is one of the few creatures that doesn't respond to the needle in. As the primal source of silk and weavers, she's immune to their magic, offers no song, only hatred. Once overcome, Hornet, the daughter of Hallownest, plunges her needle into Grandmother Silk to bind her power, leech her essence, and topple the pale monarch who holds all the kingdom in slavery. But this isn't the end to Pharloom's tale. Hollow Knight Silksong offers players multiple endings to Hornet's journey through the Lost Kingdom. I've made a detailed video explaining all endings, which you can watch at the end of this video, but for the purpose of cohesion, we'll focus only on one ending, the ending that opens up the 3rd act of the game. This ending revolves around Hornet's own character growth and the inscrutable Caretaker. The Caretaker hides well his identity. He's a snail shaman. This race, which appeared in Hallownest, is obsessed with power, and its kind travel to kingdoms suffused with arcane magic. The Caretaker is just one of a family in Pharloom, the Maiden in Moss Grotto, the Hermit in Bellheart, and the Deceased Seeker in Bilewater. They've watched as Pharloom has fallen, its power dissipating. Though their motives are their own, the snail shamans wish to see the kingdom freed from Silk's threads. At first doubtful of Hornet, as the Caretaker sees her compassion and care for the people of the kingdom, as well as her strength, he places his faith in her and offers an opportunity for a different path. Rather than take Mother Silk's place as a pale queen, Hornet could restore hope and peace to Pharloom. If you have already guessed to my desire, sir, and share some part of it, would you offer me aid in the conflict to come? Maybe, yes. I can barely bear to tell it, but there's an idea, one rare disgust, for fear of her up there sensing the score. You have conceived a method, I take it, a way to see a monarch removed, and me left free from claiming her station? We have, me and what remains of my family. It's a trap of a sort, beyond the skill of this citadel, one to go further than just her binding. You'd be just the hunter to set it, if you dare enough to try. If Hornet grants the Caretaker of the first shrine his wish, she gathers the silk and soul necessary to create a snare, a trap fashioned using the unknown power of the snail shamans, and the weavers of old that can capture even higher beings. When Hornet confronts Grandmother Silk, rather than binding the god's essence to her own shell, she drives it into the snare, which activates to reveal a gaping maw of void. This material is both substance and primal entity, denizen of the abyss buried deeper than any bug cares to venture. Void was critical in both Hallownest's preservation and ultimate downfall. Hornets dealt with it before, but the marks of void and abyss had long been erased from Pharloom's memory. Grandmother Silk threatens to drag Hornet into oblivion, but she's spared by Lace, who severs the monarch's arm. Daughter rebels against mother, and as Hornet falls, the pair wink out of existence. A power vacuum descends with the overthrow of Pharloom's monarch, and, coinciding with the activation of the snare, awakens the dark force below, which spells certain disaster for the ruined kingdom. Void tendrils, ravenous for soul, bind themselves to Pharloom's silk and rapidly expand to every corner. Black motes seep into the shells of bugs like corrupting parasites, offering strong gifts even as they sap the souls of their host. As the Hunter's Journal of the Void Mass relates, silk and shells corrupted, that void seeks now to claim this land whole. These poor shells are only the beginning. Worse still, violent quakes rack the earth and threaten Pharloom's foundations, the rumblings of a dying god. Hornet quickly learns that Grandmother Silk isn't gone. She's been dragged to the abyss, but as the void works to consume her, Pharloom's god weaves another silk cocoon to preserve not herself, but her cherished daughter. The earthquakes are the mourning of a distraught mother. Guilt weighs on Hornet, who blames herself as much as she does the snail shamans for the current predicament, and tracks the family down to their ancestral shrine. Cowards, here you hide, even as you cause your own land's demise. You seem displeased, old one. We only did as you asked, yes? The snare is sprung, the creature consumed. You bound it to that void. The white night, she fell with the mother. The quakes, yes, we have felt their force even here. So the mother resists the dark. To save the child? Oh, how unfortunate. All of Pharloom will fall to her flailing. They mention an old diving bell, housed in deep docks, was once used to reach the bowels of the earth and may grant access to the abyss. With the help of Forged Daughter's companion, Hornet descends through strata and reality to walk the dark corridors of a forsaken realm. Mother Silk is deep in the lake of void, far too deep for Hornet to reach without losing herself, but in conversation with a projection of lace, reveals her determination to save Pharloom. There is one desperate option. Hornet speaks to the shamans of a flower that repels the void she once knew in Hallownest. The princess speaks of the delicate flower, a beautiful bud that emits pale light. As the White Lady states, "Not of me that flower, nor of this kingdom. Far it traveled to reach this place, brought by one beloved fair knight of lands serene." Zemur, the Grey Mourner, brought this object from far away. From the Godseeker, a bug attuned to the resonance of gods and higher beings, we learn. Gods, many shapes they assume. This bloom then, a splinter? Cast off? Refuse of something greater. Though the seeker admits they can't hear its song. Its power against the void is witnessed only in Hollow Knight's ending cutscene if the delicate flower is given to Godseeker. The bug, corrupted and oozing void, is instantly banished along with the darkness. The flower is Hornet's last chance, and though it doesn't exist in Pharloom, it does in her memory. The snail shamans admit of a way to manifest it, but require 3 hearts of ages past, the lingering presence of Pharloom's great bugs, whose own glorious memories are only faintly preserved. These bugs ruled kingdoms that resisted Grandmother Silk, the Weavers, and the Citadel for long, protected by the aegis of their aura. The Elegy of the Deep is a song-fueled spell that allows Hornet to enter these memories of fallen Karak and Crust King Khan, of the once resplendent heart of Shellwood and Nylith, of the green pools of Redania and its twin princes, and the proud chants of the Scar Queen and the Ant Marches. To gather the hearts of these bugs is to face each in their prime, a daunting challenge for Hornet. Of the 4, only 2 are alive in the present day, Scarsinger Carmelita and Verdania's Green Prince, though they are much reduced. Pale beast, bringing ruin, we had sensed it, your riding, harsh, our final fate. If power you come seeking, mine is fated, mortal, time taken. To save the future, Hornet must destroy the past, must slay these leaders and gather their hearts in hopes that the next age might see their lands restored. With the power of these bugs claimed, the snail shamans perform a spell that consumes the hearts and the snails in the process, but sends Hornet reeling through her red memories. Here, we get a glimpse of Hornet's upbringing among the Weavers of Deep Nest and her limited time with her mother Hera before the beast fell into vigilant sleep as a dreamer on the Radiance's prison within the Black Egg. Again, I've made a video covering Hornet's story in detail, which you can find in the description. The critical moment of the Red Memory is Hornet's audience with her stepmother, the White Lady and Queen of Hallownest. The Hornet of today speaks directly to the White Lady of the past, an interesting encounter that might suggest the White Lady possesses some sort of foresight, akin to the Pale King and Mr. Mushroom. I knew the wish, and the price to achieve it, and now, across these many ages, I have only come to know it better. Strength enough that I may live to see a world better than our own, or to craft a world as I desire. That was the wish of my mother, of my mentor, and of you. Indeed, Spider, for her you become, who knows clear our desire, and has seen full the darkness beneath our house. I would show you the gift. Witness the first light, the only means we possess to resist that void with which our family is forever linked. Reach forth, child grown strong, wrest it from this remembrance, burn yourself free from our sad fate. This dialogue illustrates Hornet's growth as a hunter, a princess, a guardian of the innocent, and a champion for justice. She's become what her three queenly mothers wished her, and demonstrates a strong power to navigate the abyss and overcome the void. The White Lady's words speak of the void as a curse, but also one of familial connection. The Pale King's research with the void brought death to thousands of the couple's progeny and ultimately Hallownest's slow decay. A dark power indeed. But as the Pale King's daughter, Hornet is half-sister to the Vessels, the Hollow Knight, the Knight, and other siblings. Bound as she is to the abyss, Hornet is the key to saving Pharloom from its hungering tendrils. The Everbloom spares Hornet from encroaching oblivion as she dives to Grandmother Silk. The Pale Monarch is nearly spent, her thread unraveled, and her daughter is lost to the void. Hornet fights Lace a third time in the abyss, and the Knight unleashes void power as it eats her essence. Rather than kill her, Hornet works to free Lace from the abyss, and as the fight progresses, we can see how the void retreats from her form. Hornet shows the Grandmother that their desires align. Both wish to save Lace. With this, the Pale Being offers what remains of her life force to fuel a silk shot up to the surface. Again, I discussed this next scene in depth in the endings video, but briefly. Hornet and Lace can't break through the void lake, but as tendrils move in to devour them, they're banished by the appearance of the Shade Lord. This is the form the Knight took when exiling the Radiance from the Hollow Knight's dream. The form of the void entity also flashes. Here, we truly see that Hornet is a sister to the void. The Knight and the countless siblings behind it recognize Hornet and care enough for her to rescue the pair from the abyss's base hunger. On the surface, Hornet and Lace come too. The void retreats back into the abyss. The tremors of Grandmother Silk are felt no more. Pharloom is spared destruction and also freed from the haunted threads of a being that bound it for ages. Much has been lost, but the bugs of Pharloom are sturdy, and for the first time in many generations, they look to the future with a glimmer of hope. As for Hornet, hunter, weaver, paragon of Pharloom, we may see her story continue. Thanks so much for watching this video on the complete lore and story of Hollow Knight Silksong. Let me know your thoughts of Pharloom, of Hornet and her journey, as well as what other characters or stories from Silksong you'd like to learn more about in the comments below. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, be sure to subscribe to the channel where content is uploaded frequently. I want to take a moment to thank all of my patrons over on Patreon. Their support means the world to me and helps the channel continue to improve. If you'd like to become a lore luminary for access to me, written scripts, and early video drops, head to patreon.com/thelorebrarians to learn more. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.